Hello everyone, welcome to Carnivorous Plant Hub. Today I am going to be repotting some of these carnivorous plants here that I got from a local seller. I'm repotting these King Henry Venus Flytraps, these green ones over here. I got some red dragons or Akai Ryu. These are these kind of maroon, dark red and green and purple ones, really beautiful. And then some Drosera spatulata, some sundews here, and we're going to get these are all way overdue to be repotted. I've just been so busy lately, traveling all over the place for my son's travel basketball, so it's been just really chaotic and really crazy, and I haven't had a lot of time at home, so I'm really excited to kind of finally get these in the ground. You can see they've got some really beautiful new growth coming up, but they're also way overdue in getting out of these little plugs and getting planted into their own substrate so they can start taking off a little bit better. So let's go ahead and get that started. Alright, so what we're going to do here is this is going to be kind of a broad overview of repotting. I'm going to give you some kind of general care tips, like my substrate, what I'm putting these in, what I'm watering them with, how I water, all that stuff. It's not going to be super in-depth A to Z care for Venus flytraps. I'm going to kind of fly through a lot of this stuff. If you're looking for a really in-depth care guide for Venus flytrap care, I strongly recommend going to the description and checking out. I have an under 10-minute video that gives a lot of information on caring for Venus flytraps from A to Z, and then I have one that's much longer, that's way more in depth. It's like, I think it's like 45 minutes, and it just goes over absolutely everything you'll ever need from basic to advanced care tips. So if you have questions after this, go check those videos out, or you can throw them in the comments. I'm happy to answer questions in the comments. I enjoy interacting with everyone, so you can either go check out those other videos, or we can hash it out in the comments and talk about it. But first thing we have to do here with these is we have to get them out. So we got to get these little plugs out of this. It might be a little tricky to get out because I probably left them in here for a little too long, although it looks like they're not too tight in there, so I'm not too worried about it. And while I'm doing this, I just want to thank you so much for being here, let you know how much I appreciate it. I'm trying really hard to start my own carnivorous plant nursery someday. What I did there is actually just poked a straw through the bottom of that little metal straw. And you being here and watching this video is really supporting my channel and my dream in that endeavor. So I just wanted to thank you so much for being here and supporting me. There you go. Kind of see what they look like out. But anyway, yeah, so thanks so much for being here and supporting me. I really appreciate some of the ways you can support me is you can subscribe to the channel, you can like this video, that supports me a ton. You can also, there's a thanks button at the bottom of the video where you can leave a monetary contribution. That stuff is really appreciated, but if you don't have any money, no problem. Liking the video, subscribing to my channel, watching the video till the end, commenting, all that stuff really helps me out, and I really appreciate it. So I just want to thank you for being here and let you know how much I appreciate you. But so what we need to do here is we need to get, there's this kind of filmy stuff that keeps these plugs together. I'm actually going to pull that off because what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to plant these in with these plugs intact. I don't want to take them out of the plug. So you can see I can just kind of pull that off. We'll just put that aside here. And this one's ready to go. What I am going to do though before I plant these is I'm going to go ahead and get all this black stuff off. I'm not going to do it right this second, but before I plant these I definitely want to get all that stuff off and get rid of this dead growth. That dead growth can lead to a lot of rot. So you want to make sure and get any of that dead growth off as they turn black and die. So right now while it's out of its planter is a really good time and makes it really easy for me to get it out. Whoops. A bit of a dive there. Go, another one. These green ones here are the King Henrys. You see some of the roots starting to poke out the bottom here. Getting a little too big for these little plugs that they're in. Oh man, none of the plugs fell apart until that one. Well, there, at least this one will give you a little peek at the, see the white rhizome there? It's got a new root coming off. You can see the roots coming out the bottom there. Only one did that. I thought that I'd have more, but okay. And here are the spatulata, the Drosera or sundews. These guys are kind of wound up. This is cool to see. You see there's one kind of poking out the side here. There's a lot bundled up in here. We're gonna get these taken off so we can let these be free a little bit and let these start growing out a little more. Look at all those flowers. Look at all those. I don't know if I was gonna focus on them, but look at all those crazy flowers. They probably got seeds in them, or will soon anyway. The cool thing about these is these sundews, they self-pollinate. So sometimes, depending on, especially like the Cape sundew, they're kind of known as the weed of the carnivorous plant kingdom. Any sundew that self-pollinates are kind of almost considered weedy, because they just, if you let them just keep going, they just get kind of out of hand. Uh-oh, look at, we got some, so look at all these little crazy guys coming out the side here. I'll try to find homes for them. Okay, and one thing I'm going to do real quick off camera is I'm going to go ahead and cut off all this black stuff. Maybe I'll show you just real quick with one. Alright, I'll do the rest of this off camera, but I'm just going to show you with one of these here and what I like to do with all this black stuff. You can see here all this dead growth. Just kind of snip it off. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you just don't want all this dead growth going on your plant in the new planter. And actually, even as these turn black, you kind of want to trim them off, just because what can happen is that these old dead black pieces can really kind of rot, and they can sort of promote rot, and you don't want that mold and mildew and stuff all over your plant. So I'm going to go ahead and do these for you real quick and just kind of show you like that. Got one more here. Oops. Sometimes you can just pull these off, but sometimes if you pull them a little too hard and it's still connected pretty good at the bottom, it'll kind of rip some of the rhizome off, so I don't like to do that. But so you go, so that one's pretty much ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and repeat this process for the rest of these. Okay, and real quick before we start planting these into their planters, I just want to show you something real quick and share with you how you can get your hands on your own Venus flytraps or sundews yourself. Check this out. I'm super pumped about teaming up with California Carnivorous. They're one of the most experienced and knowledgeable carnivorous plant nurseries in the entire world. They have a massive selection year-round of all types of carnivorous plants. There will definitely be something in their nursery you fall in love with. On top of that, they've also been generous enough to offer my viewers an exclusive 10% discount on their order when they enter CP Hub at checkout. That's CP Hub. Head on over and pick out yourself a new carnivorous plant to add to your collection. You know you deserve it. Let's go ahead and get back to the video. Okay, I got all those cleaned up. They're kind of all over the place over here. You can see there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and fill up my planter here. We're going to talk about the planter. Planter is really important with Venus flytraps. Venus flytraps do not like minerals. They do not like salts. And sometimes with a terracotta planter or like a clay planter, those can leach salts and minerals into the soil and can actually eventually harm your Venus flytraps. So you want to go with something that's plastic that doesn't leach any minerals or salts into the soil. So this is a plastic one here. You see I have a paper towel on the bottom. You want to have something that has good drainage. We'll talk about the paper towel in a second. You want to make sure that there's plenty of drainage holes. You're going to be tray watering Venus flytraps. It's what's best for them. You don't want anything where the water is going to be sitting in the planter, because they are prone to crown rot, and they will rot if they sit in water all the time. What I do is I put a paper towel in the bottom, and what that does is it makes sure that none of these holes get plugged with this perlite, the substrate, or any sand or anything, and just make sure that the water can always be kind of continuously in touch with the paper towel. The paper towel will wick the water up and then put it up into the substrate and get to the roots of the Venus flytraps. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and take our substrate. Substrate is a mix of peat moss and perlite and silica sand is what I use. And then what I do is I rinse it with distilled water to get as many minerals and salts out of the substrate that I can. There's the substrate that I am going to use. This, like I said, this is a mix of peat moss. You want to make sure the peat moss that you get from the store is absolutely has no fertilizer or no additives. You want to make sure that on the back of the bag it just says 100% pure. It's probably say sphagnum peat moss, and that's kind of what you want. Like the Premier brand is good. That's usually what I get at Lowe's if I have to go the Lowe's route or Home Depot. And then the silica sand is just like it's like a pool sand, like a pool filter sand that I use. And then the perlite is just kind of a normal perlite. But what you want to do is you want to make sure that you rinse this soil really thoroughly. And then when you use the substrate, you want to make sure that it's kind of wet when you put it in, otherwise it's really difficult to use. It doesn't absorb water very well. It absorbs a lot of water, but it doesn't absorb it very well. And it can get really tricky to try to plant these in dry peat moss and then let that soak up the water. It just kind of messes everything up. So make sure you rinse it first, but you want to make sure you're rinsing with only distilled water, rainwater, RO water, whatever type of water you have that has pulled the minerals and salts out of it. That's really, really important. You can get distilled water at like big box stores. I use a zero water pitcher. The zero water pitcher is like my best friend. So I have a whole video about watering. I have a whole video about the zero water pitcher. I have videos about the substrate. And so make sure and check out the description. You have more questions. If you don't feel like I answered something thoroughly enough, check it out, because I promise you, if you have a question, I have probably answered it in another video. Or if you can't find it, like I said, throw it in the comments. All right, so let's go ahead and fill this planter up here, and I'll show you kind of what my process is. I'll show you kind of thoroughly on this one, and then for the next couple, what we'll do is I'll just kind of move it along here. So what you want to do is you want to get this a little under half full, and for this first layer, you want to pack it down kind of tight. Not super incredible tight, like you're not turning it into a slab of concrete here, but what this will do is this will push this layer down into that paper towel, and it'll make sure that that substrate's in contact with the bottom. There's no holes down here, so that that water can always continuously be wicked up. That's really, really important. Make sure that this first layer here is packed down pretty tight in the bottom, so that water can get to the roots of the Venus flytrap. And then your next layer is going to be a lot less compact. Okay, so this next layer, this last layer here, what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and pack it down loosely. You want this to be a real loose pack. This is not going to be a tight pack. Now I do like to kind of mount it up just a little bit here in the middle, because this will settle a little bit, and you don't want your plant to be too deep down into the planter. So kind of a loose pack here. The reason you want a loose pack is because you want the soil to be really aerated so that the water can get up to the roots, and you want the water to be able to go through this planter and out the bottom, so that it doesn't just sit right here at the top, because like I said earlier, these are subject to crown rot. So you want to be really, really careful with crown rot, and if this gets really hard and bricked up, water just kind of sits right here at the top, and then it doesn't, or what'll happen is it'll route to the side and then go down the bottom, and it's not getting into the substrate. So you really don't want your substrate to be super bricked up, and you probably want to repot these once a year, or once every once every 2 years, I'm sorry, at the longest, because this peat moss will eventually just become so hard and compact. And that's why you have the sand and the perlite in here, is to make sure that this takes a lot longer for it to become really hard and bricked up. That keeps it aerated, it gives it good airflow to the roots, and it gives it really good water flow as well. Okay, so this one is ready. So what you want is some kind of a tool. I'm just using this butter knife here to put a hole in here. You can use a screwdriver, you can use your fingers, you can use whatever you want. So I'm going to do one kind of over here and then one over here, because I have two. Now I did leave these plugs on, so I do need the hole just to be a little bit bigger, and that's kind of why this butter knife is going to be nice, because it can kind of give me a little bit bigger hole. And you want to make the hole pretty deep, because you do want the roots to go down pretty deep. That's important. These roots like to go down, so make sure that when you're making your hole, it is actually a pretty deep hole. Okay, just going to pop that plug right in there. That fit pretty good. I'm excited about that. And then just kind of fill around the top here. Now if you don't have a plug, what you want, if your roots are out and you can see your plant's rhizome, like this one here, you can see this one eventually kind of broke off, and you can see my rhizome there. Where you want to plant your substrate is just right here to this line here, just above where the rhizome is showing. So you want the rhizome to be covered, but you don't want it to be sticking out too far. So just where that white kind of stops and these growth points are starting, that's where you want to kind of bury it up to. So like this local seller that I bought these from, he did a good job. So these are already done pretty well, so I don't really need to do anything other than just kind of put the plug in. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and do just that. Drop this plug in here. Oh, see, that one was a little tight, so I'm going to make this hole just a little bigger. There we go, that's better. Get it down in there. Get my substrate going here. Okay, now what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have a water tray for this next part. And what we're going to do is we're going to give this a quick top water. Now I don't top water Venus flytraps all the time. I do top water them probably once a month. Now remember, we're using distilled water, reverse osmosis water. If you have one of these guys, you can test your tap water and you can see if it's under 50 parts per million. If your tap water is over 50 parts per million of dissolved solids, you don't want to use it. What I will say is that the vast majority of tap water is over 50 parts per million, so I would avoid it. If you don't have a TDS meter, just avoid tap water altogether. So I'm going to take my distilled water here, and what we're going to do is we're going to top water this. And the reason we top water this is because these holes here, there's a good chance that these holes aren't touching all of the roots at the bottom. What this will do is this will actually settle the soil a little bit, and you'll probably notice that when I do this, some holes will kind of start form in here around where I potted these. See how that is settling? Right here's a really good example. You can see there's a hole right there because all of this is starting to settle now, and that water helps make sure that we get a good settle. And you want that. You want to make sure that the substrate is touching the roots, because that's how the roots get their water, is through the substrate. And if they're not touching the substrate, there's nothing touching them and giving them water. So now what'll happen is this water will come out the bottom, and it'll make a huge mess if you don't have this plastic tray underneath there, and that's why you kind of want the plastic tray. Now real quick, while we're doing water, we're going to talk about water. And what I do is Venus flytraps, they grow in North Carolina natively in the pine savannas there. They due to against popular belief, a lot of people think that these grow in really swampy and boggy conditions, and it's actually just not true. They do grow around bogs, but they're in the higher ground of bogs, and they grow in areas where the ground actually has really good drainage. And the way it works in the wild with these is that the roots always have access to water, but the crown itself is actually very often not sitting in water. So there's good water underneath the ground, and it's always hitting the roots, but it's not always sitting up here around the crown of the plant. So you kind of want to emulate that. So I tray water these so that the water comes from the bottom up and is in constant contact with the roots. You don't ever want it to be muddy up here. It's okay if this top layer is a little dry, but you never want it to be dry more than an inch down. You never want these roots to be in completely dry conditions. You want to make sure that the roots always have access to water. So if you stick your finger down in here and you notice that it's dry down there, you definitely want to make sure and get your plant some water, because more than an inch down, that means the roots aren't getting access to water, and that can be detrimental to your Venus flytrap. So make sure that the roots always have access to water, and then you want to let this rhizome dry out a little bit before you do your next watering. In the summertime, when it's really hot outside, I pretty much keep my tray of water full all the time, and that's fine because the water is going away so fast. Usually you have to water them once a day or once every 2 or 3 days. It's okay to keep this tray full all the time when it's really hot outside. As the temperatures cool down and the soil starts to retain that water for a lot longer, you want to let this tray dry out a little bit. I'll leave it dry for 2 or 3 days at a time. Even longer if I notice that this top layer of soil is still wet. I'll wait until this top layer of substrate is a little bit dried before I actually go ahead and give it more water. And when it's cold temperatures like that, the soil retains the water a lot better, and it really subjects the plant to crown rot if you leave this tray full year round. I know a lot of people will argue with me on that, but I promise you, I just did a video about crown rot. I lost one of my favorite Venus flytraps, so go check out that video if you don't believe me about crown rot. And the difficulty that I have here where I live in the Northwest is during the spring and early summer, we have high temperatures during the day, 85 degrees, and then it drops to like 40, 45 degrees at nighttime. And that's really difficult because it's hot during the day, but then it's really cold during the night. And oftentimes what happens is when we're watering these during the day, the nighttime, that crown rot will start to set in a little bit. So every year I usually lose a couple of Venus flytraps. It was just a bummer this year that it happened to be one of my favorite cultivars. So okay, that's the process for repotting. Now you just want to kind of rinse and repeat. Alright, we have one more set of Venus flytraps here, and while I did this, one thing I forgot to really talk about to you was what type of lighting that Venus flytraps need. And now it kind of depends. What you should do is you probably should grow these outside. They grow much better outdoors in full sun. If you get a plant from a grower that's been keeping them inside, or if you get it from like a Lowe's or a Home Depot, you want to slowly acclimate them to the sunshine. Especially if you're already in like midsummer. A lot of times if they've been grown indoors their whole life and then all of a sudden you just stick them out into the bright hot sunshine all day, they can actually burn. So what you want to do is you want to leave them in for like a couple hours a day for the first week, and then just kind of slowly go up an hour as you see that they're not burning. Burning will be kind of some browning on the edge of the leaves, and they'll start to kind of turn brown and black and then eventually die. So you'll be able to see the browning and the burning pretty easy. It literally looks like your plant is getting a sunburn. So if you start to see it's getting burnt, just pull it out of the sun and you know, make sure that you're just acclimating them slowly, and they'll do really well out in full sun. But they should have full sun eventually. They can handle 14 hours of full sun a day. These plants grow in North Carolina where they just are exposed to sun almost all day, every day. So really important that you're giving these guys a lot of sunlight. If you're growing them indoors, you need a really nice, strong indoor grow light. I use the Barina grow lights. I have Sansi grow bulbs that are really nice. Either one of those work really well. Also, anything that I talk about today, guys, is in the description. So if you want to go check out any prices of any of these lights, or like my TDS meter, you can get one of those. I got a link in the description. You can go check those out. But the Barina lights work really well. The Sansi grow bulbs. The Sansi grow bulbs are awesome. They work really well. I strongly recommend those. They're pretty affordable. I would get the 36 watt. I wouldn't mess around with anything less than 36 watt just because it's a more powerful grow light. And you want a light that's really powerful. And indoors, when you're putting them under a light, you do want to give them probably anywhere between 10 and 14 hours a night, because they really just need a lot of light. These plants are very dependent on a lot of light. So that's one of the main things people do to kill them, is they'll try to put them in a windowsill or something like that, and a windowsill typically just won't give them enough light that they need. So I strongly recommend not using a windowsill. If you can, the best thing to do is to grow these outside. But if you're going to grow them indoors, you have no other choice, which some people do. You need a really strong grow light. Probably not a windowsill. A windowsill will not work. Now, I have had people tell me, hey, my windowsill worked great. I've been growing up for 3 years on my windowsill. I can promise you that that does happen on occasion, but that's also not the norm. Normally, when people grow them in the windowsill, they become light starved and they die over the span of the next few months. So make sure and give them a really good light source. Most windows nowadays are made to filter out a lot of the UV and important stuff that these plants need. Humans don't need it. It's not good for humans, but it's really good for plants. And so windowsills are just, they're made to not be great for plants. Or not windowsills, I should say windows, but I think you know what I mean. So windows, no, but you want a really strong, you can grow it in a windowsill and then maybe supplement it at nighttime with a grow light. You could do that. I know a lot of people do that. They just like to have them in their windowsill because they're a beautiful plant and they're really cool to have around. So absolutely, if you want to have a grow light in your windowsill, that's a great way to do it. I used to do that with some of mine. I'd keep them in the windowsill during the day, and then at nighttime I'd maybe turn on my grow light for another 5 or 6 hours just to make sure that they got enough light. So a couple different ways you can do that. So there we go. So there's the 4 Venus flytraps. Let's go ahead and move on to the sundews, or the Drosera spatulata here. So we're going to kind of do the same thing with these. So I'm going to use some smaller planters for these, but I'm using the same basic fundamentals. Now the big difference with these in terms of growing is they do like a lot of the same conditions as a Venus flytrap. They like a lot of sun. Sometimes they do require a little bit more humidity, so that is something to consider. They do like a little more humidity, and then to get the dew on their leaves, sometimes you have to give them just a little more humidity than you do Venus flytraps. And they like to be in a lot more water than Venus flytraps. Sundews like to be in water all the time. So you want to tray water your sundews, and you never want to let that tray get empty. Those roots want access to water all the time. You can't really give them too much water. They don't rot like Venus flytraps do. So here's the planter I'm going to use. I got these little cute white hexagram planters. Hex 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Octagon, I guess. Octagon shaped planters. I thought it was 6, but same thing. I'm going to pack down this bottom layer right here. Make sure that substrate is in contact with the bottom, and the paper towel is in contact with the holes down here. I don't think you can be able to see that, but you can see that the paper towel's really kind of coming out the hole there on the bottom, which is what you want. So the Drosera or sundews, they also like distilled water, although they're a little more tolerant than Venus flytraps to distilled water, or to regular water. So if your tap water is like a 50, anywhere between a 50 and 100, sundews are a little bit more tolerant. But you want to make sure that it's definitely under 100, or I really like to keep it under 50. So I'm talking about the parts per million in the water. They do like full sun. They like to be in a lot of sun. These will do a little bit better in a windowsill than a Venus flytrap for whatever reason. They seem to do a little bit better on windowsills than Venus flytraps. So that is something to consider. It's sometimes a little bit easier to give them a little extra humidity, especially if you put them in like a kitchen window or a bathroom window. They like the humidity in those areas a little bit. So I do have a video where I talk about care for sundews as well. So if you need some more information on sundews, you have some questions about how to grow sundews, I do have some videos that will also be in the description for these. Again, same thing though, if you have questions and you don't want to go check out the other videos, or you can't for whatever reason, go ahead and throw your question into the description here, and I would be happy to take a stab at answering those questions. See that there? That's a good example of, see how that really settled down right there? You can build it back up. Now we're filling all those holes down there so that these roots can be in kind of constant contact with that substrate. That's exactly why we top water these. Now from now on, same thing with these, we're going to bottom water these from a tray. I'll get a bigger tray than this one because I wanted to make sure that these always have access to water. Never let your trays go empty with sundews. Sundews want that water all the time. They want to be soaking wet. So, and then they'll make sure and give you a lot more dew production and be much stickier and ready to go for catching insects. So there we go. Okay, that's everything here. Got my little sundew right there. We'll see if he takes off with my Venus flytraps. There we go. So yeah, so there's my Venus flytraps and my sundews. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to my channel. Make sure that you go check out the other videos I have. I got so many great Venus flytrap videos. I got so many great sundew videos. So many videos that talk about so many different aspects of Venus flytraps and care for them so that you can really become a master grower and learn how to grow these really well. So make sure and go check out my channel. Make sure to subscribe so that you can see, I'll be giving updates on these probably fairly frequently. I give updates on tons of my different cultivars. I do unboxing videos and all that stuff. So make sure and check out my channel. And thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And I hope to catch you in my next video. Bye.